I call to order this special meeting of the Scottsdale Unified Number 48 Governing Board on June 8th, 2021. The time is 6 p.m. Vice President Sanowski, will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yes.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The chair will now have a roll call starting from my left.
Zach Lindsay.
Libby Hartwells.
Julie Sanowski.
Jan Michael Greenberg, and I believe Board Member Beckman is joining us via telephone. Is that correct?
Correct, present.
Excellent. All board members are present, and we do have a quorum. We will now move to the approval of the agenda. Are there any requested amendments? Board Member Beckman, do you have any requested amendments to the agenda as presented?
I do not.
The chair moves to approve the agenda as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Vice President Sanowski seconds. It is moved and seconded that the board approve this agenda as presented. All those in favor say aye.
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 The motion carries 5-0. The board will now move to agenda item 3, student and staff recognitions and celebrations. Dr. Menzel.
Thank you, President Greenberg, and good evening, members of the governing board. As you well know, this school year has been nothing if unusual. And normally we don't have an opportunity to celebrate student successes in the month of June. But given this is an extraordinary year, we're going to celebrate some extraordinary Scottsdale Unified School District students. To assist us with the celebration, I'd like to invite Dr. Sakos to the podium.
All right, thank you, Dr. Menzel, President Greenberg, Vice President Sanowski, governing board members, and Mrs. Wagner. We are pleased to be able to introduce to you the third installment, if you will, of our 2021 National Merit Scholarship recipients. The final announcements for the 2021 awards will be made this month. Would Max Lundfeld, Sadant Saxena, Danielle Sherman, and Brandon Yang please join me at the podium? Last week, the National Merit Scholarship Corporation announced more names, around 3,100 winners of National Merit Scholarship financed by U.S. colleges and universities. Each sponsor college selects its scholarship winners from among the finalists who plan to attend their institution, and these 4 recent SUSD graduates are among them. The awards provide between $500 and $2,000 annually for up to 4 years of undergraduate study. This year, 160 private and public higher education institutions in 42 states are underwriting these merit scholarships. Our 4 grads are among 7,500 members of the national class of 2021, and they will receive the National Merit Scholarships worthy of nearly $30 million for college undergraduate studies. First up tonight, Max Lundfeld, and she even wrote that for me too.
It's all right, it's a common mistake.
Okay, Lund. All right, Max. Max is what we call an SUSD lifer. His entire K-12 learning career has taken place in the SUSD classroom, starting with Hopi Elementary, moving on to Ingleside Middle School, and finishing at Arcadia High School. Max's achievements in just his senior year include graduating in the top 5% of the Arcadia class, being named one of the math department's 2 outstanding 4-year math students, receiving Arcadia's AP Chemistry Award, receiving a state biliteracy seal for Spanish, and being named a Scottsdale Charros Outstanding Student. Whew. That was just your senior year? Wow. All right. His principal, Dr. Kane Jaganowski, could not be here with us tonight, but he had these words to share with us. Max is leaving a legacy of excellence at Arcadia High School, from his academic achievements to his recognition on cello in all-state orchestra ensemble to his leadership on campus. Max has been a joy to work with for so many students, staff, and teachers. We are very proud of his accomplishments and are excited to see his future successes. Congratulations, Max. So, Max, you going to tell us where you're headed in August?
I will be going to Texas A&M University studying mechanical engineering.
All right. Our next National Merit Scholarship recipient is Siddhant Saxena. I did that okay, didn't I?
Yes.
Oh. All right. Siddhant has made an impression on Chaparral High School these past 4 years and a Cheyenne traditional for 2 years before that. Principal Dryford could not be here this evening, but I do see Ms. Stombras here, principal of Cheyenne Middle School, and you two sharing a few memories at Cheyenne. So can you believe it? Now you've graduated. Here are some things to know about Siddhant. He graduated in the top 5% of his senior class, was named one of the 2 most respectful seniors by the Chaparral administration, and you'll meet the other one next. Was a member of the National Honor Society, is a candidate for the College Board AP Capstone Diploma, which is based on 2-year-long AP seminar and research courses. We're told that Siddhant has a great sense of humor.
By Amy.
They want me to say it again. We're told that Siddhant has a great sense of humor and had a great rapport with his peers throughout his school. Congratulations, Siddhant. And I'm going to present you with the challenge coin, and you have to tell us what you're going to be doing in August.
All right.
So there you go.
I'm going to Barrett at Arizona State University, and I'll be studying biochemistry.
Nice. All right. Brandon is another SUSD stellar student. He's a tremendous coder and developed and led the programming side of the Chaparral robotics team. Brandon's interests range from differential equations and astrophysics to Mandarin and cyber security. He graduated in the top 5% of his class as well, was selected by the school's faculty as this year's outstanding senior in advanced technologies, is Chaparral's other most respectful outstanding senior. Liked learning so much, he attended SUAC summer school 3 summers in a row. Wow, all right. Congratulations, Brandon. This challenge coin. And of course, you get to tell us what you're going to be doing this August.
I will be attending ASU Barrett, and I will be studying computer science with an emphasis in software engineering.
All right, gentlemen, you can take your seats now, and Danny's going to stay with me.
You've been muted. To unmute yourself, press *6.
Okay. Danielle Sherman. If Danny's name sounds familiar, it's because board member Beckman told us about Danny last month, but for a different award, her U.S. Presidential Scholarship. Because of the prestige that accompanies that designation, being named a 2021 National Merit Scholarship winner, and because she's here with us today, we're going to combine celebrations, and Dr. Hirsch is going to help me do that. Dr. Hirsch, come on up. I'm going to do the first part because I like bragging over here. Some things you don't know about Danny. She spent her lifetime, her entire SUSD learning journey in the Desert Mountain Learning Community at Desert Canyon Elementary School, Desert Canyon Middle School, Cheyenne Traditional, and Desert Mountain High School. She's a graduate of Desert Mountain's International Baccalaureate Diploma Program. She is adept and comfortable with core subjects such as math, science, English, as she is with studio art and art design. Her diploma has a biliteracy seal for Spanish on it, and
You've been muted. To unmute yourself.
stop muting me. And one of her biggest fans is Dr. Hirsch. So there you go. Now I can let Dr. Hirsch finish up, Danny. But I'll be here with your challenge coin.
With no script, so you might have to get the hook. But I really, on my way over here, I said, I know the information will flow because you are one of those students that just is mesmerizing all the time, anytime I see you. When I ask teachers to describe you, Danny is a selfless student, meaning that she is always willing to help anybody before herself in every single pursuit, including art, including math, including in her clubs that she's been the president of, and the literary magazine that would not have happened without you. That is absolutely stunning. So the only regret I have is I didn't know you as well as I wished your freshman and sophomore year, and then I started to go, who is that young woman? And just really know that you're also an athlete. And most importantly to me, that I think the audience should know, is the U.S. Presidential Scholar, there are only 2 per state. So this is quite an honor. And once you get recognized, you have to continually apply, and it's very nerve-wracking and a pretty intense application. But it was, I just knew you were going to win. And so I was happy we took the picture early, so now I can use that for all of your awards that you have. So I really am really proud that we talked about you making Desert Mountain a destination high school because of your attendance and what you've accomplished there. So thank you very much, and thank you for always being there for other people. I think that's really important and a telltale of your character. Thank you.
Danny, please accept this challenge coin. This is the way you're supposed to do it, like sneak it like this.
You've been muted.
All right. And then, of course, your certificate recognizing your presidential scholarship. Oh, we can shake with that, too. Yes, of course. And we have a lot of moms and dads and proud principals out there, so congratulations to you as well.
And where is Danny going?
What's next for Danny?
Yeah, what's next?
Oh, I'm sorry, Danny. I was so mesmerized by everything Dr. Hirsch said, I kind of lost my script. What's next for you, Danny?
I will be going to Emory University and studying English and creative writing.
Nice.
All right, we wish all of these amazing seniors best of luck in their future endeavors, and there is no doubt that SUSD is very proud of them and that they will go a very long way. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sakos. And congratulations, Danny, Max, Siddhant, and Brandon, for making the most of your learning journey here at Scottsdale Unified School District. We are proud to celebrate your accomplishments here and look forward to hearing back as you go on to the next phase of your life. And as you set out, we know that you will be successful in whatever you choose to do, and congratulations on behalf of the Board of Education and the administration.
Thank you, Dr. Menzel and Ms. Sakos, Dr. Sakos, and Dr. Hirsch. Really just amazing accomplishments throughout this year from all of our students, but especially the 4 individuals tonight. Congratulations and good luck on your future endeavors. The board will now move to agenda item 4, Superintendent's comments. Dr. Menzel.
Thank you, President Greenberg, Vice President Sanowski, and members of the governing board. I do have a few updates to give this evening, and I want to start with summer school, which is now underway. And just a few highlights. This is not in any way intended to be exhaustive of what's started so far. But you know, we instituted a tutoring program, and to date we have at Chaparral in person 18 students and 85 sessions. At Coronado, 13 students and 70 sessions. Online with a teacher, we've got 4 students and approximately 24 sessions. And then Varsity Tutors, which is a company we're working with to help us with the demand, 35 students and approximately 200 sessions. What I've also been told is that tutoring sessions for the second part of the summer program are nearly full at the present time. So a lot of demand, and that was a late addition to our offerings and is going very well so far. I also have an update with respect to the Summer Bridge Math program, and I want to thank Dr. Lindsay Gilbert for providing me the information. When you think about Summer Bridge, we're focusing on those transition points and making sure that students feel confident in their math skills. We have 30 incoming 6th graders, 38 7th graders, 42 incoming 8th graders, and 41 incoming 9th graders. We expect a total of about 375 students between the two sessions in June and July. There are a couple of things that we want to note in terms of celebration. Anytime you start a summer program, you expect a few hiccups, and we've had a couple, but not too many. And we want to thank and celebrate our transportation and our nutritional services department because they've stepped up, they've responded. In talking with Patty Bilbrey, she was told in one program to expect 12, and she was then told that they had 60 kids they needed to provide food for. So we have an amazing team that can pivot on a dime and make sure that the needs of our kids are met, so we want to thank them for that. And then just one anecdotal story. There was a group of incoming 7th graders at Tonalea working on their exercise, and they worked through a break because they were having so much fun in engaging in the activity. So when you think about the opportunities our students have to reinforce and build skills that they might not have had before and do it in an enriching and exciting way, I think we've got a couple of programs here to celebrate, and we'll have more information as we come back in June and then in August in terms of the full breadth of the summer school programming. Secondly, just again, a quick reminder on our strategic planning process. We've had a lot of meetings. We finally had our first in-person meeting in this room last week, which was fantastic to be able to have the entire strategic planning design team together. A handful of people needed to remain online, but for the most part, we were here. We have one more full-day session scheduled on the 16th, full day, 6 hours. And from that, we expect to be able to bring forward to the governing board a proposed vision, mission, and value statement for adoption, and that will bring to closure phase 1 of our planning process. Then we will pivot into phase 2, where we really get into the meat and bones of developing a strategic plan that identifies what our goals are, what the key performance indicators will be, and our strategies in order to accomplish that for our students. Earlier today, President Greenberg, Vice President Sanowski, and I were able to tour the repurposed Homewood Suites Hotel on North Scottsdale. They call it Casa de Alegría, and it is a place where families who are seeking asylum in this country are sent for processing. And we've heard a lot of information and much misinformation, I think, circulating in the community about who is there, whether or not there's a risk to the community as a result of the individuals who are there. And we were invited to take a tour of the facility, understand the process, and learn a little bit more about the families that are coming through. We heard today that about 98% of all the families that are coming through that facility are from Brazil, but other countries include Ecuador, Uzbekistan, Romania, Haiti, and Cuba. The average age of a child as part of a family is 8. The average parent age is 30. One bus typically shows up every day with between 44 and 48 individuals. There have been some rumors about thousands of people being housed there, but there are 90-some rooms in the Homewood Suites. There aren't thousands of people who are staying there. And on average, the people who arrive stay for 50 hours. And then they are sent to their sponsors. Usually the sponsors are family members. They could be parents, children, distant relatives. Sometimes there are other organizations that sponsor them, but they're all sponsored by someone. They're given paperwork. They have expectations that they need to comply with, and then they're put on a plane in most instances to the East Coast or to Florida for the Cubans, where they often have family members. And from there, they go through the asylum-seeking process. We talked to a field officer who has more than 30 years as an ICE official. She said she's worked in centers back east where they had hundreds of people who were detained, and they were free at any time to walk. And yet in her entire career, no one has left the facilities. They don't really have a reason to leave, because if they leave, then they compromise their ability to be considered for asylum in this country. So what we saw was both an encouraging sign. I think about Alex de Tocqueville's comment that America is great because America is good. We have families that are coming from some of the most unimaginable circumstances, seeking refuge in this country. We are a nation of immigrants, And what I saw today is people who honored the humanity of individuals who are seeking that support. And I felt that the entire program and the way it's been done assures me that there's no security concern for our students around the corner at Chaparral. Principal Dreifert joined us for the tour. And I just wanted to be sure that we were able to go on record with respect to what we saw and how that process is unfolding. 3 other quick things. One, we had a vaccination event at Saguaro High School with NOAA as the partner, and a total of 265 individuals between those who had scheduled appointments and those who walked in were vaccinated at Saguaro. Chaparral Lights is another thing that has been on our radar. Dennis connected with Qualight, the lighting company, today, and they're planning on starting the light study on Thursday evening. There'll be a drone pilot with the gentleman from Qualight. They'll be taking photos and light level measurements from above the field. Also, we'll be taking light measurements, not only the field, but also adjacent areas like Gold Dust and adjacent properties. And that's one of the things that, as we've talked about previously, we saw plans with predicted light spill. We need to get the data in terms of where that is. And then we'll get a report. We'll determine whether or not there needs to be additional light measurements taken at that time, and then we're going to meet with the neighbors to talk about next steps. But I wanted to just let you know that that process is ongoing and starting this week. Finally, this has been an incredibly challenging year for everyone involved with the school district, for our students, our parents, our staff, for governing board members. I know that 4 of you have children or had children in the school system. 1 graduated from the school system, and I know that each one of you has put in an extraordinary amount of time and effort in serving the needs of our students. And so as we get close to the end of this school year, I just want to express my personal gratitude for the way that you've engaged in some of the most difficult work that's imaginable when you're volunteering to be a board member. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Dr. Menzel, and I would just like to say that I think Vice President Sanowski and I agree with your description of our tour of the ICE facility today, and I admire the humanitarian effort that is going on with that organization endeavors and the ICE agents. It looks like they're doing just a great job to keep our community safe and also do their job, so I appreciate that. The governing board will now move to agenda item 5, information discussion items. 5A, benchmark academic indicators. Dr. Menzel.
Thank you, President Greenberg. I'd like to invite Dr. Guerin and Dr. Bachna to the podium. As you know, we've made a commitment to identify a set of benchmark academic indicators, along with others, to track our trends over time, to inform instructional practices, ultimately to hold ourselves accountable for improving educational outcomes for our students. Tonight, Dr. Guerin and Dr. Bachna will walk through some of the updates in terms of where we are as we continue this journey. I'll turn the podium over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Menzel. President Greenberg, Vice President Sanowski, governing board members, Dr. Menzel, cabinet, and guests. Tonight, Dr. Bachna and I will present an overview of our current academic indicators and our next steps as we continue to focus on moving forward in the goal of making sure each student reaches their full academic potential. I first want to talk about the why. The why is so important. Why do we need data? Why do we collect data? What do we use it for? It is so important to ask this because we need to prioritize the data we collect, the time it takes teachers to collect it, and how we use it. We know that we would like to use it to increase instruction, inform the practice of teaching, and improve the science and art of teaching. I want to briefly mention Dr. John Hattie, who had done a meta-analysis of over 20 years. Education has so many initiatives and programs out there. What really works? What really moves the needle? And he assessed this by determining what programs or initiatives or practices result in at least 1 year's growth for student achievement. So this is really something that drives us when we're looking at assessment. One of his practices that he feels really moves the needle on student achievement is ensuring teachers have expertise in diagnosis, intervention, and evaluation. And we understand that teachers have so much on their plate, and we want to make sure they have the right data. The data that they're going to collect is going to actually impact instruction, that they're going to collect it just in time, right when they need it, and it will be in at their fingertips, and it will guide their practice. It will help them answer the question, when I try a new technique, how is it impacting student growth? Is it making a difference? So all of these pieces are put together a puzzle of an individual student and how we can help them move forward. We want to empower our teachers by providing real-time data that is meaningful to them and not just another task that they have to collect. Dr. Bachna and I are working hand in hand to move our assessment plan forward, and I'm very excited about the committee work that she's doing now and what is going to happen as a result of the data dashboard. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Bachna, and I'm very excited about this presentation. Dr. Bachna.
Thank you, Dr. Guerin. Good evening. So first, let's talk a little bit about who we are in terms of the demographics of our school district. On the slide, you can see our demographic breakup in terms of how our demographics lie in years 1920, 2021, and also in the state averages for 2021. You can see our student population is predominantly white. The Hispanic Latino population is 23%, which is lower than the state average of 45%. Our American Indian and Alaskan Native population is 2%. Our Asian is 5%. Our African American is 4%. And our students identifying as 2 or more races is at 2% this year. And finally, our Native Hawaiian population accounts for less than 1% of our overall student body. We are 49% female and 51% male, same as the state averages. Our economic indicator, as measured by the percentage of students receiving free and reduced lunch, is at 19% this year. That is a decrease from the previous school year, likely due to the fact that the federal government has extended the free lunch program to all students regardless of whether they apply for it or not. Our English language learner population is 3%, lower than the state average of 8%. And our special education population is 11%, also lower than the state average. So let's talk a bit about the current state assessments for general education. There were no state assessments given in spring 2021 due to the COVID pandemic. This past spring, we administered the AZ-M2, which replaced the AZ Merit Test. Basically the same test, a new name this year. The grades tested for AZ-M2 were 3rd through 8th and 10th grade. These students took a test of English language arts, which included reading and writing, and they also took a math test. The high school math test covered geometry and algebra 1 and 10th grade. Finally, our 5th, 8th, and 11th graders took a science field test this year, the new AZ-Sci test, which is aligned to the new science standards. Because it was a field test, we will not be receiving results of this assessment this year. For preliminary score release dates, we received our 3rd grade scores already for AZ-M2. 4th through 8th are just coming out today, and grade 10 will be coming out on June 18th. The ADE official release dates of the data, once they've done all their comparisons and cleaned it up, will be in July or August of this year. The future of state assessments, looking at the general education assessments, next year the name of the assessment changes again. It'll now be called the Arizona Academic Standards Assessment in grades 3 through 8. The bigger change will be at the high school level, where we will become a district that gives the ACT Aspire to all of our 9th graders and our ACT test to all of our 11th graders. Now, our district has been paying for that ACT exam for the last few years. Now it will become the official state assessment. Finally, the AZ-Sci will be given in grades 5, 8, and 11, and that's going to be the official science test going forward. Where we are. So for 21-22, this testing calendar, we convened a working group to look at what we have on the calendar, what we should be using, and how we should go forward. So this working group is composed of parents, teachers, instructional coaches, and my office, which met already twice in May. We do plan to convene again in the summer. We drafted calendars for every grade level, and we also compiled a list of assessments and their purposes. So we wanted to look at each grade level, what we're giving already, what do we use those assessments for, and how are the results used? So that it's not becoming as we introduce new tests, what we have on the calendar, should we keep what we have already, or should we monitor and adjust based on what we need going forward? So just to give you a background of where we've been, for the past 3 school years, we've used school city teacher-created benchmarks as our primary testing modality for ELA and math. These are 20 to 25 item tests that were aligned to the curriculum maps for the school district. While they've had the same performance levels as AZM2, they aren't really predictors of AZM2 performance. The tests are revised slightly each year and often include more innovative item types, such as multiple response questions, so that students get that authentic practice before they get to AZM2. The items are reviewed with the students after testing. The teachers have heat maps where they can go through the assessments and go through the items, and students can mark what they got right and what they got wrong and look at the distractors. This school year, we also introduced the FastBridge assessments of reading as diagnostic screeners in kindergarten through grade 3. We also started administering iReady math assessments to all of our middle schoolers. For next school year, we are still determining which tests will be mandatory. We're discussing FastBridge and CKLA tests, CKLA being aligned with our tests aligned with our ELA curriculum. We are looking at if the teacher-created benchmarks really need to continue to have enough value to continue to be mandatory. And we are also recommending the adoption of pre-ACT tests for high school. These tests would be given 3 times a year in 9th through 11th grades and offer predictive scores for the ACT students we'll be taking in 11th grade. So looking at 21-22 testing calendar next steps, I will be conducting a correlational analysis of current assessment data and the AZM2 that was just administered to see where our results lie. We'd like to do a survey. We will be doing a survey of teachers regarding assessment usage and the proposed testing calendars. I will be reconvening the testing working group to discuss the feedback from the survey and also the analyses and create a final recommendation. And that recommendation will be reviewed with cabinet and administrators before the calendar is finalized. So in terms of where we are in the data, the next few slides I'll share with you the results of state and nationally normed assessments that Scottsdale students took this school year. This will include a look at our PSAT and ACT scores, our graduation rates over time, and our college entrance rates over time. To begin with, let's look at the COGAT testing. So this is a 2nd grade test. We do blanket testing to screen kids for identification for gifted services. It's important to keep in mind that this is an ability test, not an achievement test. This assesses the potential to learn, not what a learner has been taught. The composite score that you see up here includes all 3 areas that are measured on the assessment: verbal, quantitative, and nonverbal. The gray dotted line represents the national distribution of scores, while the blue bars represent the distribution of Scottsdale scores. In both years, on average, we had less students in the lower levels. This is indicated by the blue boxes being below the gray dot. The distribution of scores for the current school year is more evenly distributed along the bell curve, while the 1920 scores skewed slightly towards the higher side. You can also see overall we assessed approximately 300 less students this school year than we did in the previous school year. Turning to our AZ Merit results, these are our AZ Merit results percent proficient over time in grade 3 English Language Arts. The final one with the asterisk for spring 2021 are the results that were released by the testing company, the preliminary results we have thus far. Later this week, we'll share with you the results of other grade levels. In August, the State Department of Education will release scores for our full academic year students that may shift some of these averages up or down based on our enrollment. This slide does not show the same students year over year, but instead each unique group of 3rd graders. 3rd graders in spring 2019 versus 3rd graders this current school year. Overall decline of 5% in our district on the ELA test so far that we've seen. With a slight increase, the only increase that we see among our demographic groups was in the American Indian Alaskan Native category. The biggest difference in student performance was in the African American and male populations. Arizona's overall average scores in 3rd grade during the preliminary release for the whole state showed an 11-point drop in English language arts. Looking at the same information for math, overall, most groups show a decrease in performance in comparison to the third graders of 2 years ago. Of perhaps greatest concern is the decrease in our English language learner population on both ELA and math in terms of percent proficient. Fortunately, these students were all invited to participate in summer school this summer. Turning now to the 8th grade iReady math comparison that we have, these are students that tested percent of testing on or above grade level. These are the same kids over time. So we're looking at their fall scores, their winter scores, and their spring scores. On the first line where it says overall, our district scores are in blue. The number that I've added in the italics is the national averages. So you can see we are exceeding the national averages in fall and winter. Spring averages are not available yet because some schools haven't even finished school yet and they're still testing. These tests are adaptive, so as the student progresses through the test content, the items get easier or harder depending on their performance. You can see growth in the population of students both overall and in most of our demographic groups. Turning now to some of our high school assessments. SUSD has blanket tested all 10th graders on the PSAT for the past several years. What you're seeing on this table is the percentage of our 10th grade students who meet the benchmark scores for college readiness. In other words, if a student scores at or above the benchmark, the PSAT indicates they are on track to be ready for college when they graduate from high school. Our 10th graders did better on this assessment in the fall 2020 testing than their counterparts did in fall 2019. District averages are better than the state average by 3 points this year and by 8 points at the national level. 49% of our 2021 sophomores scored as on track in college readiness. Turning now to our ACT graduating class results. Scottsdale started giving the ACT to all 11th graders in spring of 2018. What you see on this table is the progression of scores over time for students meeting the ACT college readiness benchmarks. While they were lower when we first started testing all of our students, the number of students on track for college went up 1 percentage point the following year. The state averages also went up while the national average stayed at the same 37%. Turning now to graduation rate. There's a lot of information on this slide. What you're seeing is the overall 4-year graduation rates in Scottsdale schools are consistently in the high range. You can see our graduation rates in blue and the state averages in black. The state hasn't released their publicly released their graduation rates for 2020 and 2021 school years yet, which is why we only see the blue. And finally, looking at our National Student Clearinghouse, this is a database where we upload all of our graduating students each year, and the National Student Clearinghouse tells us how many students have entered into colleges around the country. Here's our college enrollment over time in the fall immediately after high school. Along the all students line, you see the district percentage of students enrolling in college the fall after high school in blue, while the national averages are in black. You can see that there was a 5% decrease in immediate college enrollment for the class of 2020 for both Scottsdale students and nationally. So let's take a moment and talk about our future. And that gets us into our data dashboard. These next few slides show a preview of some of the types of visuals a teacher or administrator will be able to access on demand in the data dashboard. Information such as test scores and attendance, aggregated at the grade or school level, but also at the student level as needed. A teacher can easily see attendance patterns within their classes and see who is chronically absent. For our high schools, our teachers and administrators will be able to see which students are on or off track to graduation. The graphic on the left-hand side, while hard to read, shows a variety of information that will be available to teachers. Things like the percentage of their students with D's and F's in core content areas and GPA distributions. On the right-hand graphic, you can see the early warning overview or indicator, where we'll be able to configure risk levels of student subgroups that will allow counselors and others to see students that may be at risk due to several indicators. Things like attendance, grades, and test scores. In addition, teachers and counselors will be able to create their own groupings of students that they want to track over time. If they have a group participating in a certain intervention and they want to evaluate if the intervention is working, they will be able to do so. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Guerin.
Thank you, Dr. Bachna. So we have hard work ahead of us to make sure our students are where they need to be. But there's several things that are causing such optimism. We've been through the pandemic, but we've learned new strategies and skills in innovation because we had to meet students' needs. So we're going to harness those innovations and new strategies and take the best of what we learned to move forward. We have an infusion of resources with our ESSER money, where we can take a very focused approach and ask for innovative ideas from classroom teachers, from teams, from principals, from administrators on if you had the funding, how could you meet students' needs? So we can really dig deep and hear those ideas and actually put them into action and then measure them to see what actually works and what is effective. We're going to bring forward a new data dashboard because so many times we ask teachers to do so much and they have to dig into one program or another program to find out if the intervention is working, to pull the attendance data, to pull standardized achievement, and it takes so much time. So we want teachers to have a snapshot of a student that maybe they think an intervention is not working, but then they see there's an attendance issue. So is it an attendance issue or is it an issue with the intervention? How many weeks and how much growth will it take to get the student to benchmark? And are we closing that gap? This real-time data will put the tools in teachers' hands. We're also involving them in making the decisions on what assessments are giving us the most bang for our buck and driving these decisions. So after Dr. Bachna's committee makes recommendations where she is surveying all the teachers and reaching out to groups to ask, is this what's going to work for you? Is this what's essential? What can we make optional? What is important to you? We want to have, we want them to have the tools and the data they need, but we don't want to overtest. So we are also going to design the data dashboard to align with the strategic plan, and it will feed us the data we need to know if we're making progress toward the strategic plan. In addition, as we spend our ESSER dollars, we will be able to report on which programs, which innovations are effective, and how they are closing the achievement gap or meeting the social emotional needs of students or helping with student growth. We saw through Dr. Bachna's presentation that we have a lot of highlights and we have areas of focus with significant need. So we're ready to take all of these opportunities and put them together to move forward in a systematic way. And that's why I have an excitement about our future and, of course, complete confidence in our amazing SUSD teachers. On a personal note, I just want to thank Dr. Bachna and her SIMR team. We asked them to do extraordinary things this year that sometimes we thought might break our student information system, like unenroll and re-enroll and change everything 3 or 4 times a year. And they never said it couldn't be done. They just rolled up their sleeves and did it. And I could not express my gratitude to her and her team. So I just wanted to mention that. And we're both happy to take any questions at this time.
Thank you. Are there any board member questions or comments? Vice President Sanowski.
Yes. Question about the grade 3 ELA. I'm aware we are not tracking cohorts, yet that would give us individual data progress points. So when we talk about this new data dashboard, is it possible for teachers to be able to do that, to cohort kids, and we can?
Yes.
Okay, good. Because that seems very meaningful, not just to us as a district overall, or just to a teacher, but to parents, to students, to recognize that they are learning and maybe what they could do better. So I'm glad we're going to be discussing the idea of cohorting our assessments.
Vice President Sanowski,
Yes.
You bring up a couple great points. We're going to be asking the different groups on what they need to see on this data dashboard. So what an elementary teacher might want to have at his or her fingertips might be different from a principal, a district instructional coach, and then we can talk about a parent view, that a parent can easily access student data in real time. So that's why stakeholder involvement is so important as we build these different dashboards together.
Super, thank you. And I'm glad you referenced Hattie's work, because it doesn't make a whole lot of sense spending a lot of time on things that we really don't have a lot of impact on. So I appreciate that. I had a question too about the ELL and the math specifically for the 2021 results showed 15%. Any summaries as to why?
Not at this point in time. I'd have to look into it further and really dig into it, see how many students this really is in third grade and how many students are being assessed. It's concerning.
Yeah, it is, and I'm wondering too if it is the language itself.
Right.
And in order to complete math successfully, you need to be able to read the language. So being that they're ELL students, maybe there's a connection there that we're just not simply addressing with the types of tests and the language on the test.
I agree.
And this is raw data, and we need to find out also what students were in which learning models, how
Yes.
engaged they were with the learning model, if they were learning at home. We did have some students not participate. I don't want to make any of those assumptions, but as we get the real data, that's the clean data in July and August, we'll be asking so many of those questions.
Super. One last comment and then a note of appreciation. PSAT, we give it to all 10th graders, correct?
Yes.
I recall a few years ago, there was conversation of potentially dropping that to earlier grades,
Well-
potentially 8th grade, so that students going into high school then have opportunities to pursue different paths, or is there still conversation about that?
I have not been here for that conversation, but that could be. I do want to say that I think it's a great thing we give it in the 10th grade, because the 11th grade is when it's counting
Yeah.
for the National Merit Scholarship, so they get that practice. But there is another version of the PSAT
Yes.
for 8th and 9th that
Yes.
we could think about considering for going forward.
Maybe depending on how many assessments are
We
given
have.
by grade level, that would be smart. And thank you for including surveying teachers on the time on test. I think, teachers are here to educate kids, and I understand assessment's an important part of it, but it can't be the sole purpose. So thank you.
Board Member Hart-Wells.
Thank you for compiling all this. I know that's quite a bit of lift, and there's a lot of data that you didn't present that you have, and so thank you for taking the time. So just that decision-making alone, I'm sure was a bit of a lift. Before I have 3 pages of questions, so I'm not going to dig into all those details right now, but I would appreciate if we had an opportunity to sit down and talk about, and some of it's the presentation of the information, just making sure I understand how it's presented, so they can conclude preliminary findings in an accurate context. But let me just ask you, back on slides, maybe we can back up to slides, the 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, all that data. What is your takeaway when you see that only 60% of our third graders are, what's this? Oh no, this is raw data, but around 60% proficient. What is your takeaway from that? I'm thinking holistically here.
I'm glad that it's 60% and that for us, but I think I'm more concerned for the 40%. We need to look at what's happening and what's going on in terms of where they're at, because obviously 40% are not proficient. I think that's where our diagnostic screeners are going to come into play to really dig into what skills they're having trouble with. And we need to really focus and address those concerns at the start of 4th grade and in summer school as well.
Do you think, I'm just going to look at that SUSD overall number, do you think that the delta of 6%, just comparing the 2017 to 2021, is that a statistically significant number? That decrease of 6%?
I would have to look into it further to tell you for sure.
Okay.
We do know the state decreased
11%.
11%. So we know that there is a COVID impact everywhere. So we do know that our decrease was less than the state, but we also know that we're not okay with a third of our students not at benchmark.
And again, can I add, I think this is where getting into more specific data is important, because some of our students, this is the first state-level test that we give. So kindergarten through third grade, and even figuring out where they've been in terms of preschool experience, all feeds into this first, state-level look at, are they proficient at the end of third grade? But if we're looking at some of the data and where our students started, they may have shown tremendous growth, but still not yet be proficient. And so that's why peeling back the layers is critical. So I will agree that 60% is not a number to be happy about, but I do think that there's more to the story than just looking at the aggregate data, and that's where there's some really power in terms of if we're seeing more than a year's worth of growth in classrooms where kids are 2 grade levels behind, we should celebrate that, even though it won't show up as a proficient score on this test, because the kids are making more growth than a year's worth of growth in every academic year. So it's really being able to tell the full story. This is just one part of the puzzle.
Sure, yeah, fair enough. And that was my comment. I know there's a whole lot of data, right? It just depends on what you want to tackle. And we only have so much time to go through this. Along those same lines, actually, I'm just going to reiterate the English language learning data. What I see as a conclusion from that data is that the numbers are not reflective at all of achievement, but rather, if you gave me a Spanish math exam, I would fail it, and it wouldn't be because I don't know my math skills, although I know some people might think I don't, but I do. It would mean I don't speak Spanish. And so I think there's a lot of findings in the granularity, and I appreciate that it's there. But just kind of thinking from a board perspective, what should we be doing? So along those lines, you said PSAT. The ACT and pre-ACT or ACT Aspire will be the new benchmarks going forward. That'll be the state assessments. Did I understand that right?
Yes, so instead of having an AZM2 in high school, we will now have an ACT Aspire for 9th graders and the ACT for 11th graders, and every student in the state will take them.
And so will the, right now the district pays for the PSAT and the ACT. So will there be a kind of a need to maybe reassess how we're deploying our resources as a district versus what the state funding will support?
Right, we will no longer need to pay for ACT ourselves.
Yes.
The state will.
Okay.
But
And-
now the pre-ACT looks very enticing and helpful, so.
Okay, so that's right. And then on the college readiness benchmarks, I believe this is slides 16 through 18. So the clearinghouse.
Oh.
So if I just kind of do a little bit of a back of the napkin. So we had in the all students, 69% entering college in the fall. We had a graduation rate for 2021. We had a graduation rate of 94%, 2020. And yet we had college readiness benchmarks at 43%. So I just did a little kind of normalizing to the 96% graduation. That kind of adjusts the numbers so that we have college readiness approximately 46% of our of our students, and then 73% entering college. That's a delta of approximately 27% who might be going to college that aren't ready, possibly, right? That's one possible conclusion if you kind of take the 3 sets of data and link them together. And I think that's a interesting number because it's high, and that's also another area, not casting blame. That's why you look at these things, is so you can start to reassess where your energies are going to go, right? So that would be something I would like to also understand a little bit more, and that may be, that's squishy, just because I'm taking some pieces of data that are probably all generated in different ways. So I appreciate that that's true. But we also then, if you kind of do that same analysis and what's left are the students, is approximately 25% of students who are not going to college. And they may or may not be in the college readiness percent or not. And what do we do for them? They're going into the job market in some way, whether it's a technical vocation or it is directly into the job market or both, which is usually what happens. How are we readying them? And that's also a significant percent of students. And again, just as a constructive comment, that's another area where we should assess where our energy has been and where we want it to be, because we have approximately a quarter of our students that need that attention, and that's a very different path than getting ready for college. So, and a viable one, right? Yeah. So that's just an observation. And then one of the questions I had about the dashboard was, where is and maybe I just can't read it, but where's the SEL component in the dashboard? I saw the attendance. It's really tiny. So is it there?
No, those are sample dashboards of what it could look like. And so we have to build it. So we absolutely can add the SEL indicators. And I think that's going to help paint a picture of student overall attendance, standardized test scores, academic achievement, intervention, behavior, SEL, all of those will paint a picture of where a student is and what they need.
Okay. And then along those lines of, so we're going to customize this so that we can have all these hard inputs and soft inputs. I refer to those as soft inputs. Are the teachers, to Board Member Sanowski's question, kind of taking it from a different perspective and more operationally, along the lines of more operational construction, are the teachers going to be able, at the different grade levels, customize their dashboard? Because a third grader dashboard might look, or it will need to look different than a ninth grader.
Absolutely, yes.
So they'll have that creative license to customize their dashboards. Okay.
So we'll try to design, we'll seek information from elementary, primary, intermediate to build some standardized ones. And as we grow and everything's clickable, and I think you can customize what you want to see right when you open it up, right? So it's going to be a journey to get better and better and make it exactly what we want it to be.
Okay, great. All right. And I think, yeah, those were my overarching points, but I look forward to continuing this conversation. I'll just leave it at that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other board member Lindsay?
You had mentioned on the English language learners that we invited them to summer school. Do we know how many accepted?
I think we're at I'd have to look back. I can find that out for you.
Okay. Do you know like decent number of who was invited?
I will get back to you with that. Yes.
And then we also, I'm so sorry, we also offered some choice on programs. So some English language learners might have wanted to go to Summer Boost or their local elementary program, but we can tease all that out.
Right.
And then on the iReady for 8th grade math, from fall to winter to spring, is it the same set of standards each time, so it's apples to apples, or is it aligned to a pacing guide?
I believe, but I'd have to talk to Dr. Lindsay or Dr. Gilbert to confirm.
Okay. And then it shows, and we'll know when the other results come out for elementary, but it seems like we need a focus on interventions. With everything that happened with the pandemic, is there any update on the K-5 ELA adoption process? Are we still?
So 2 pieces. We have summer programming times 3, to different levels and different options. So we're excited about that. And what's different about that also is we're using common assessments to determine effectiveness. So we have spring scores, and then we will test again in fall. And we will, Dr. Bachman will work her magic to see what programs were most effective using Hattie's guide. Did we get growth from students? Did we start to close the gap even if they're below benchmark? So we'll be answering those questions, and that's going to help guide our decision-making in the fall, particularly with the ESSER funds. Okay. And then you had a second part of your question.
Yeah, with the focus needing to be on interventions, and from site to site being consistent. Is there any update on the K-5 ELA adoption?
So with the ELA adoption, we are planning to start that journey in the fall, but the first question will be, do we need the ELA adoption?
We'll look at what we're using, what we have CKLA units of study. Maybe we need a certain piece of it and not the whole thing. So we are going to get a group of stakeholders together and ask, where are the kids? What do we need? What do teachers believe we need? What is the research telling us? And what are we missing in our current curriculum as we look at the standards and look at the data? So we don't want to make the assumption, because sometimes you go for a full adoption and sometimes you find pieces of it. What we're growing at and getting better at is consistent interventions and consistent data to measure the effectiveness of those interventions. And so I think this is going to help us bring it all together.
Okay, thank you.
Board Member Hartwells.
Sorry, I wasn't done. I remember I had one more question. And maybe this is to think about, and that is, a lot of the slides show the district comped to state and national. And my question is, do we have, and I realize you're using the evidence-based Hattie model. Sorry, I'm going to start coughing again. But do we have a goal for ourselves that are delinked from the national and state numbers?
Dr. Menzel, that is your cup of tea.
So I think it's a really good question, and that's part of analyzing this data in terms of where we are. I still want to make sure that we have clarity around the assessments that we're administering in order to set the goals. So when the state changes the assessments, in those cases, it's harder to know, are we setting an arbitrary target, or is it one that we actually know what we're working to achieve? The more consistency we have in those state level assessments, then we can actually set those targets. And that would be part of what I would envision will be part of our strategic plan, that we'll be very clear on the kind of growth and progress that we want to see over time. To the point Board Member Sanowski was making, I want to track cohort data over time. I want to know how last year's third graders did as fourth graders, how they did as fifth graders, and watch that trend. Because if I just look at third grade over 5 different years, it's 5 different groups of kids. So how do we track the growth of each grade level as they progress through the system? And I think one of the natural outgrowths of our strategic planning process is to set those performance targets in order and be realistic about what's achievable. And within a particular year, and then over time, we should continue to see improvement with our students, and so that would be the goal. And I would just, one other thing, since I have the mic, I'm looking at the 8th grade iReady. Why I like this slide is it shows growth during the course of the year. What I don't like about the slide is that only 51% of our students were proficient in math. And when you look at our mathematic achievement data across all of our cohorts, we are underperforming where our students need to be if they're going to be successful at that next level of education and training and then moving into their adult life. So it's an area where math builds. And so we need to make sure that the foundational elements are solid and that students are progressing on a planned schedule, and that we have the right interventions in place in order to address that. So I think you can see something positive here, but also acknowledge that we have a lot of room for improvement.
Board Member Beckman, do you have any questions or comments?
I do. I have 2 quick questions. First of all, I share the concerns of the rest of the board with regard to the ELL learners. I think that's very concerning. While I appreciate that we have summer school tutoring being offered to all of them, and they've been invited to various support mechanisms, I also want to know when we can expect to get some information back on that particular group and if our support measures are working. I don't want to wait until the next typical cycle of here's another presentation with everyone in it. Oh, by the way, they came up X%. I think this is something that we need to be addressing a lot more specifically along the way. So that's the first question.
We can certainly find that out, the assessments that they may be giving during that programming. So it's Dr. Gilbert, I believe, that is leading that. So we can touch base and let you know what date to expect that data.
Okay, because you mentioned July, August. I just would like to kind of have us given a summary, et cetera, if how summer school went for those kids. The second comment/question is, So I would like to see, if the board hasn't had an opportunity to review all of the National Clearinghouse data by individual high school, it really gets into some more comprehensive information. Speaking to what Board Member Hartwell was discussing, how many of these high school seniors are actually graduating from college within 5 years, within 6 years, et cetera. All of that by individual high school gives you a lot more detailed information that I think is really relevant to this discussion. Looking at the summary data and comparing it to the state and to national levels is one thing, but we also need to look at all of our individual high schools and see how they're doing and where the support is needed, not just the aggregate.
I'd be happy to share that with you guys. Yes.
Thank you.
Are there any additional board member questions or comments? Well, first of all, thank you for the presentation and for answering all of our questions so far. I believe Board Member Hartwell's did take my main question right out of my mouth, and that is what is, if you will, I love acronyms, our KPIs on this? I mean, do we create them? Do we establish them for tracking over time? Have we done so in the past? Because, I think we do need a goal of some sort. We don't have the data for 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, because as you said, it's not come out yet. But when we take that, we've done it in the past, and we align it up, 3rd to 4th, 4th to 5th, what are our goals? What is it that I guess the goals you have set for yourselves as a department or administration so far? Do we have key performance indicators that we've set?
So that's why we're working on a strategic plan, so we have alignment. Each school has a school improvement plan and is very focused on student growth and meeting benchmarks, improving data. But what we are working on is a very explicit strategic plan, so we all have that vision of our overarching comprehensive district of where we're going and how we're measuring it and how we're going to get there and how long it's going to take us. And I anticipate quarterly or more reports on how we are doing on those KPIs.
I would just add, one way that I think about this is really triangulating data. I think it's problematic if we look at a singular data point like, what's it going to be called, AASA? If that's our singular data point as a new assessment, it probably doesn't tell us the whole story. So I also want to look at what growth measures do we have? So where did they start and where did they finish academically in the classroom, to the point that, someone might not test proficient, but might have shown extraordinary growth in a year. So I want to at least acknowledge the efforts of classroom teachers to move kids along and accelerate their learning. And then there may be a third indicator, but trying to figure out how do you paint the full picture in terms of what students have learned, because not every student's a good test taker. And so a test by itself might not be the only way. So I think we set performance targets, but we do it in multiple areas in order to ensure that our students are progressing at a pace that will lead them to be successful.
And I appreciate that. I think you can have multiple key performance indicators, but to my question, I guess, if I'm understanding the response correctly, is that pretty much until this strategic planning process that we're currently going through and will develop, but until this process has come about, we've actually not had key performance indicators that we've been measuring to. It's mainly been looking at just these numbers. Would that be a fair statement that we don't have those?
We're kind of in an analysis phase for two reasons. The impact of COVID. We shut down the last quarter of last year, and then it's had a disruptive impact this year. So we're kind of assessing where we are. We're getting the first look here, third grade scores, the other AZ2, M2, whatever it's called. Those scores were in Cindy's inbox earlier today. So we'll look at those. What I can't answer is, will we be able to pick a percent that is defensible for third grade ELA on AASA? We could do it, but I don't know if it's going to be arbitrary or if we can actually, for third grade, it is going to be arbitrary because we don't have any second grade measures to be able to say this is a realistic target. We might be able to get a more realistic target for fourth grade, so you start with where our achievement levels were for our third graders here. it would be reasonable to expect that we would show growth for the fourth grade cohort, and you could probably set a target. How we set the target is the thing that we haven't defined yet, so that it's purposeful and aligned to something that is accomplishable for our students and staff.
So, oh, sorry, Dr.
Can I
Guerin.
add something else? So, and we don't have a full year of FastBridge data yet, right? We started it after the fall. And so once we have a full year, we're going to be able to see, that's another performance indicator. And that's going to be a performance indicator of growth. So we're going to have some information on students. We're not only going to see where they are, where their target areas are, but how can we close that gap and how much growth we're expecting. And not only that, the rate of improvement. The rate of improvement is absolutely critical because we can know how far behind they are, but depending on that, how long is it going to take to get them to grade level? And are we actually going to make that rate of improvement by the end of the year? So all of those things can help us develop performance indicators. And now that we have some nationally normed assessments, that's going to really help drive this decision-making on are we making an impact? Are we closing the gap? And then these scores should come up as well.
Right, and so I appreciate that because I think you're absolutely correct. There are at a minimum two measurements that are important. One is actual performance on these snapshot reviews, and then growth, individual growth. So I completely agree with that, and I completely agree that one of our objectives had to be implementing systems to start capturing that so we can start that KPI system and doing it. But I guess my question is, and perhaps it's difficult to answer because I know a lot of you were not here 2+ years ago, but before COVID and before all this distraction, before the loss of our exam in 2019, all of this, do our departments in this area, or potentially more broadly, but did our departments have a system in place, like any sort of indicators, or is it really the idea that now that we're really focusing on being methodical, being strategic, looking at what we need to adopt to measure growth and to measure performance, that now we're looking at that as part of the strategic plan, that we're, I guess if you might say, maturing in that area, so that is becoming a focus of ours.
I know there was a strength of the continuous improvement plans for the site, and as district, we supported that growth, but I couldn't say for certain.
I agree. The schools have had school improvement plans and their own goals in place for a time, and they've done their own achievement goals that Dr. Hygott or Dr. Sakos could probably speak more to than I can, but they do exist.
Okay, I appreciate that. In terms of the, I guess, dual pathway, if you will, I think in broad brush, Board Member Harwells is right that we have two groups. We have groups that may enter the workforce immediately upon leaving, and groups that leave to go into college, and then a third group that may do some other activity. In terms of preparedness, what with the ACT, I guess my question is we have these standardized exams coming in. We have this ACT, which I think is great because they are nationally normed, and that's very useful. But is that what we're going to use to evaluate college preparedness or readiness? I've just, out of curiosity, I know there's been for decades debates over what do these SAT and ACT exam scores actually mean, and I know very recently the ACT was very angry when a study came out saying that actually one's grades are the better indicator of, for example, college performance. Because we don't want to over-test, but we also have the state requirements to do these tests, are we looking to as part of the strategic, I know it's early because we're not at that phase 2 yet, but at least so I can float it out there if there is no answer to the question, what are the thoughts about how we truly evaluate student readiness for that next phase after they leave our schools?
So I would like to bring Dr. Sakos and Ms. Shear in on that conversation, maybe at a later time, to talk about career technical education and how that supports. I'm not calling you up here right now, Dr. Sakos. that we're partners with East Valley. EVIT, East Valley Institute of Technology, is just so exciting, such an opportunity that provides workplace skills for college-going students and non-college-going students. So I think we could really delve into that in an exciting way, and I would want to rely on the expertise of Aaron and Dr. Sackos.
And can I add, so it's hard to say that a particular test that a student takes really can tell level of readiness for college. It can be an indicator, but again, the best indicator is if our students are completing AP courses and successfully passing those assessments, or they're successfully completing dual enrollment classes where they've done college. Because when you learn how to do college, then, and you're successful at it, you can do more of it. So I think there are other ways besides just having the ACT test to determine readiness. And to Dr. Guerin's point, I think CTE credentials, we want our students when they graduate, if their pathway to productive employment is with a specific trade, we want to know what the credentialing is that they've mastered during their time with us, and that they've got a pathway for stackable credentials, because we know it's all about lifelong learning.
Well, and I would, apologies, and I would put to that if we were talking about college performance, then it actually would be, for example, the National Clearinghouse data of how many of our students are successfully completing the 4 years as a percent of how many started, as a percent of how many students we have total, should that be the career path? Because, I mean, I can't speak for the rest of the board, but I would be, I'm not necessarily someone who is gung-ho about every single student needs to go to college. I don't think that that's an accurate statement, and it hasn't been. But, for the dashboard customization and all of those elements, I think it's great that teachers of different levels and different members can customize, but is there any concern about, if you will, kind of over customization where we have one teacher saying that this is what is really meaningful for to guide their instruction, then we have another teacher the next year, or even the same grade level, same school, what have you, saying, no, I don't think that would happen because our teachers are professionals and they work together in a collaborative environment, but I'm just saying, that process seems to be in place, that they will be allowed to collaborate with each other and come up so that there is consistency there? Would that be fair?
Yes, and you're reminding me of an analogy that we used all summer long. We have to order off the menu. There's no a la carte and no buffet. We're a unified district. So that analogy served us well because we are a large district and we want to be customized and meet every need. But we also have to be strategic with our resources, and we also have to be aligned and provide alignment and coherent, which is Dr. Menzel is very focused on that. So we're going to deliver that. So that's why I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver. It's going to be a journey. We're going to build it. We're going to have teachers help us determine, and principals and instructional coaches and leaders, the TILs, tell us what data they need and how we can present it in a way that they can use it right away, just in time, when they need it to inform instruction.
And one final question before I move to Board Member Harwell's, and I apologize. And again, it might be premature because I understand that we might be discussing this as part of the Strategic Planning Committee and doing other work throughout our district. But in terms of nationally normed, we've brought up other exams before about international standards. Is there any talk of that currently, of doing something that's internationally some sort of metric beyond just the ACT, or is that something we just feel there are already too many exams right now? We don't want to add something on until there's a really comprehensive system in place.
So the way the PISA is administered is every 3 years, and it's a random sampling. And so it's not like we can just choose to do that. If there are other international assessments that could yield some benefit, we want to benchmark against the best. The question is, what's the right metric to do that? I don't know if it's a test per se, but I think that that's always on the table for us because we want our students to be prepared to compete with anyone around the world.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I will hand over to Board Member Hart-Wells.
I keep thinking of things. So the discussion on dual enrollment, I think that's actually a nice synergy with another action item that's on the agenda tonight, and that's the joint committee education with the City of Phoenix and the Scottsdale Community College. Along those lines, and I agree, it's workforce development, job market. whether a student's going to go to college or not, they're going to end up in the job market at some point, right? So I wonder if there is something else to think about here, because you need another thing to think about, and that is increasing the number of dual enrollment opportunities for our students. And it does seem like there is an appetite for that collaboration across entities, and there's the resources, and this might be we might have our opportunity to strike to build out project-based learning assessments, which are effectively what a lot of EVID, for example, you had indicated, and I think that'd be very valuable. I will also put my vote in for coding and artificial intelligence. That needs to start being integrated into the school's curriculums in the elementary school. The kids are going to see it. We're all using it anyway. We just don't call it that. So that's certainly something that I would also ask that be considered. But I do think the dual enrollment opportunity, that seems to be some low-hanging fruit, or possibly low-hanging fruit, considering the collaboration that's on the agenda tonight. So, thank you.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Are there any further board member questions or comments? Board Member Beckman, do you have any further questions or comments?
No, thank you.
Well, thank you very much for this very thorough presentation, and I'm sure it'll be very helpful to multiple different projects that are ongoing in the district, so thank you. It was certainly a clap-worthy presentation, so I will join you in that. Unless you're clapping because it's finally over, in which case. The board will now move to agenda item 5B, information discussion item, first read of proposed revisions to governing board policy DIE, audits, financial monitoring. Dr. Menzel?
The policy committee met to discuss the policy DIE, and I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer McLennan to give an update in terms of what you have in front of you.
Mr. President, Ms. Skanowski, members of the governing board, Ms. Wagner, Dr. Menzel. The policy committee has met a number of times on governing board policy DIE. It was presented to the policy committee and taken directly from the city of Scottsdale's regulations regarding their audit. The district is currently working with the city of Scottsdale regarding the audit of one project, as you well know. And so the policy revisions that are being proposed tonight for a first read are comprehensive and substantial. They're outlined in bullet point in the information discussion item, and I'm happy to review that with you if you'd like. We have received, the legal department of SUSD received comments directly from one of you that were substantial in nature, and so we are going to be meeting next week, Jan Michael and another board member and I, to discuss some of those comments received and to take a further look at that. So I expect that you will see even more substantial revisions than typical between a first and second read. And the board is not bound to only have 2 readings of a district policy. So if you need more to get this right, you can do that. So without further ado, we would present this for your consideration for a first read.
Thank you. Is there any desire by the board to have Ms. McLennan open it up and go through the edits at this time? Or are there any questions or comments that board members have that we would just like to move forward with? Board Member Beckman, do you have any questions or comments at this time?
I do not.
Okay, well, as Ms. McLennan said, we will review this with one of our other board members, and Sharon Walker has agreed to come in from the city to work with us as well so that we can get this right, and if we do need more than 2 reads, we will have more than 2 reads. But we hope that we can make these revisions to this policy as currently presented, make the additional revisions and push it out to you early next week so that at least there's time to come to that decision. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The board will now move to agenda item 6, consent agenda. Are there any questions or comments? Board Member Beckman, do you have any questions or comments about the consent agenda?
I do not. Thank you.
The chair moves to approve the consent agenda as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Vice President Sanowski seconds. It is moved and seconded that the board approve the consent agenda as presented. All those in favor say aye.
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 The motion carries 5-0. The board will now
So
move.
can I introduce?
Apologies, Dr. Menzel, yes.
So tonight, we have 3 of the individuals that you just officially approved to hire. We have Dr. Junior Michael, who will be the new Ingleside principal. We're really excited to have him get started. I think tomorrow he's starting, but, and we have Matt Gromack, who is taking over at Kiva. And Christine Bono, who will be the Director of Early Childhood and Community Education. Thank you.
Now the board will move to agenda item 7, action items. Item 7A, approval of the fiscal year 2021-2022 expenditure budget and call for public hearing. Dr. Menzel.
Well, thank you, President Greenberg. As you know, the budget process is iterative in nature, and unfortunately, the state of Arizona still hasn't concluded its planning process, but tonight Shannon will give you an overview of where we are in the process, because notwithstanding the delay of the legislature, we still have timelines to meet.
Thank you. Board President Greenberg, Vice President Slanowski, Dr. Menzel, board members, and community guests. Tonight, we're looking at the proposed budget for the 21-22 school year. We are required to have some things done by certain deadlines. So those basically is we have to have a proposed budget submitted and approved by July 5th. So we're a little early, but this is about the time frame we always do things. We are required to have a link on our website so that all members of the community or anybody who wants to can go onto ADE and see exactly what that budget looks like, what the summary looks like, where we have things. So that will be uploaded, assuming this is approved tonight, will be uploaded to the state tomorrow with that information put on our website. Then we have 10 days that has to be out there, at least, before we do our adopted. So we'll get that posted this week, and then our adopted would come to the board on July 22nd. At that time, we are required to have that done by July 15th, so we'll be within that time frame. And then again, any budget we have adopted, revisions, all have to be posted on our website. So again, there will be a link on our website that shows how to get to the ADE website and exactly the details within the budget and where we have things budgeted. So when we look at the budget development for next year, we presented to the governing board in January 19th, February 2nd, and March 2nd some estimates of where we thought the budget would land. February 2nd and April 20th is when we looked at the capital budgets. We had town hall for anyone, and then we had thought exchange open through late January to get ideas of what was important to our stakeholders. As Dr. Menzel mentioned, the state doesn't currently have a budget. So we're in a little bit of a different situation than what we've been in the past. It's been a while since the state did not have their budget adopted in time for us, but that's where we are. So because of that, we have to propose and adopt our budget based off of the funding from last year, because we just don't, we have ideas of where we think it's gonna be, but we don't know exactly where that's gonna land. We do know that the state did make changes to the classroom site fund. Those used to be 3 buckets, 2 of which were used to pay for salaries, 1 being performance pay. That's been combined into 1. And we know that it opened up for more options for who was included within the classroom site fund. Basically, student support services were included. So that opens up more opportunities for employees who in the previous have not been able to receive those classroom site funds. Right now, we're proposing, because that came out so late in the year, we're not proposing making really any change as to how we're doing things. That's really something I think needs to go through SEA and how we want to move forward on doing that. And so right now, we're proposing just keeping things how we have. This is for next year, and then we can develop what will be the process moving forward. So we have them included in that conversation. Looking at possible changes that we think could happen is the base level would increase to $4,459, which is what we had been basing all of our previous estimates based off of. One change that came about maybe 2 weeks ago, is a group weight change for SPED students. So they're just minor changes, but actually they equate to a lot of money for us. So just a small change, one group would move from 0.003 to 0.093, so it's just a small increase of 0.09. And then a second group would change from 5.833 to 5.988. Again, very small change, but because it's in the weight, that helps us out considerably, and then helps us out moving forward. They did also add a new weight for gifted. We've never had ADM for gifted students, and there's some qualifying factors for it, so we don't really have an estimate of what that will be for us. That'll be something that's new for this next year, but there will be some additional funding that ends up because of that new weight, if they move forward with that. So really the big changes from what you'll see from what was tentatively approved in March to what we have tonight has to do with the base level. We had to revert back to using the prior year base level amount. The other change is carry forward. We have been watching our balances throughout the year. A couple things happened that have made it so that we are carrying over, or we anticipate to be able to carry over considerably more than we have in the past or what we anticipated. The biggest thing being we had to do the distance learning reduction. It ended up being not as much as we thought it would be. That was close to $1.82 million change, so that was the biggest increase for us. We had increased average daily membership at the end of the year, so that helped us out considerably. And then our expenditures have just been lower than normal. I think that has to do with COVID. Schools aren't buying the supplies that they would normally be buying throughout the school year. So all of those kind of mixed together. In addition we said we weren't going to pay the premium to the property casualty premium to the self-insurance trust. We're moving forward with that, not doing that. So all of that mixed together brings us to a anticipated $15 million carryover. We won't know for sure until we wrap up the year. We're still paying expenses throughout the year, but that's what we're anticipating. So because of that, it made it so that even though our budget is being funded less than what we anticipated originally, because we don't have a base level amount for students, we could do a couple of extra things. We were able, this change with not having the budget, it's not making a dent on making it so that we suddenly don't have enough in our budget to cover what our anticipated expenses will be for next year. It's also making it so that we can do some extra things for employees and help us to continue to look at what we can do in the future regarding salaries for employees. So this just kind of gives you, the real change is basically a $3 million difference of what it could possibly be if our ADM stays the same and they make the changes that are possible. So the next steps is that we will post this on our website tomorrow with a link to ADE. Like I said, that will be done, should be done by tomorrow, but by the latest on June 11th. And then on June 22nd, we have a public hearing on the budget and seek the governing board's approval to adopt the budget, which will happen, like I said, on the 25th, or I'm sorry, the 22nd. And then we can do a revised budget. We've always had by December 15th, but because the state hasn't come up with a budget, they're wanting that done by September 15th. So that should, by then we should have our budget. We should actually have somewhat of an idea of what our ADM looks like and have a much better idea. But withholding the ADM could go down from what we think it could be. I think what the proposed, or the budget would possibly be would be actually more than what we have proposed here, unless something happened with ADM. So with that, questions?
Are there any board member questions or comments? Board Member Beckman, do you have any questions or comments?
Yeah, just really quickly, Shannon, can we just take a couple more seconds to discuss that carry forward for the public that may be watching? There's sometimes our community members and anyone misunderstands what carry forward actually is, and they see 9 million and 15 million or go to 15 million, and it seems like a considerable number. Can you just get into a little bit more detail about what carry forward is as it relates to this?
Absolutely. So when we talk about when we do the budget, we budget for everything that we have. So we look at every position that we have within the district, the supplementals that we offer to employees, all of the costs that we could have for what we think the cost could be for utilities. Salaries and utilities are the biggest cost for the district. We have a lot of vacant positions, and that happens through classified, through certified, and so because of that, we still have to budget as if that position would be filled for the whole year. What ends up happening at the end of the year is that, we budget a certain amount for those positions and we just don't fill them. Or maybe they sit vacate for a couple of months until we can get them filled. And so you end up with vacancy savings, essentially. That also happens when you don't fill a position. There's benefits, also one of the highest expenses for the district. So we end up with these savings that happen because of these vacant positions and vacant, essentially, benefits for employees. We had, for this year, budgeted for supplies for schools and utilities. We moved a considerable amount of our utilities over to the enrollment stabilization grant. That really lowered what could have been for our expenses for this year. And schools just didn't spend as much as they normally would in a school year. A lot of students were under SOL, which you're not going to have a need for paper and pens and additional supplies. Additionally, there wasn't PD. We usually spend money on PD and curriculum type things for those PD classes. There was no need. Everything was virtual this year. So I think the bulk of that is really going to come down to vacancy savings. However, we just, with COVID, did not spend as much, and we were able to move things to the enrollment stabilization grant, which we had to do, and so that frees up expenses, which is why we have much higher carryover than we anticipated.
Thank you, Shannon.
Thank you. Are there any other board member questions or comments? Shannon, just a couple questions here. So our 2021 ADM, I see yours listed at 19,821, and we're budgeting for 20,870 for next year. Could you re-explain why we're budgeting for an increase in student enrollment, other than we're an amazing district and everybody wants to be here?
Absolutely. We had a large portion of our students that enrolled in Scottsdale Online Learning this year, which has a different factor used to calculate ADM. Instead of counting based on being at school each day, it's based on the minutes that you are enrolled. We don't have that many students taking SOL next year, and so by moving those students back into the classroom, that increases our ADM. So when I looked at what number to use for next year's ADM, we took the 100th day in January, when students were moving somewhat out of SOL and it back into the regular classrooms, what that looked like. So it was based off of if those students in SOL had stayed in brick and mortar, what would that ADM look like? And I do think I think a lot of kids will return next year that possibly, kindergarten stayed home this year.
Okay, thank you. Do you happen to know, and I was trying to find it, I apologize for not asking beforehand, do you happen to know what our teacher experience index multiplier was about?
I think I have it in here. I want to know, I don't have it in here.
That's okay.
It's
usually on the worksheet.
1.0, it's like 1.02 something. I can get you the definite amount. And it stayed from this year to next year. It changed ever so very slightly.
Good. Well, it's an important multiplier.
Yes,
so
it is. It makes a lot of difference.
Yeah, it's nice to keep an eye on that. The other thing I want to note, according to what we will be filing, the average salary of all teachers employed in fiscal year 2018 was $50,314. By next year, we intend that the average teacher salary pay will be $61,121. So over the past by 4 years, we'll have increased teacher salaries by about 21%. It's a 6% increase from this year to next year as budgeted alone. So I just wanted to highlight that and bring that. And then the addition of the weights for special education, I was not aware of that. That is absolutely fantastic. I mean, those are significant increases. I mean, they seem small, but if you go from 3 to 90, I mean, 0.003 to 0.09, I mean, that's...
When I looked at it originally, it looked like it would be close to an $800,000 amount for us. So that makes a huge difference. And then I was just looking, I did have our TEI. It is 1.0264.
Excellent. Thank you. I appreciate the specificity there. Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, we just had our special education task force update. We want to make sure that we're providing those services, and additional revenue to help supply that to those students most in need is a fantastic thing. So thank you very much. Are there any additional questions or comments? Board Member Beckman, do you have any additional questions or comments?
I do not. Thank you.
Thank you. The chair moves to approve action item 7A, approval of the fiscal year 2021-2022 expenditure budget, and call for public hearing. Is there a second? Board Member Hartwell seconds. It's moved and seconded that the board approve action item 7A, approval of the fiscal year 2021-2022 expenditure budget, and call for public hearing. Is there any further discussion? Dr. Menzel, do you have any comments? All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 The motion carries 5-0. The board will now move to action item 7B, approval of joint advisory committee on education to serve jointly with members of the council of the city of Scottsdale and members of the governing board of the Maricopa County Community College District. Dr. Menzel.
I want to thank Jennifer McLennan for her work in partnering with the city of Scottsdale in this effort proposed by the mayor. He contacted me shortly after he was elected to indicate that he would like to reinstitute a partnership that had been in place previously, and Jennifer can talk about the development process and where we are.
Thank you very much, Dr. Menzel. Mr. Greenberg, members of the governing board, Ms. Wagner. What's presented here tonight is the formation of a board-appointed committee. You have heard me many times warn you that we don't want to form board-appointed committees because those committees have to adhere to the open meeting law. Well, this is one in which you are making a choice to do so. You are doing so pursuant to Governing Board Policy BDF, and the City of Scottsdale has already approved this matter on their agenda a few weeks ago. So they did so via a resolution as per their own internal regulations. What we have before you here is the option for you all to approve a board committee that would sit with members of the City Council. And also, it's anticipated that members of the Maricopa County Community College District, specifically from Scottsdale Community College, would also sit on the committee. I do not believe that that public body has yet considered this, so you would be the second of two. The superintendent and the mayor would sit as ex officio members of this joint committee, but there would also be the option for that joint committee to meet without those individuals if you chose to down the road. And it's anticipated that you would meet at least quarterly. So the action to be presented tonight is dual. It's both the approval of this board-appointed committee as well as the selection of two members of the governing board to sit on the committee. What I would anticipate is that on an annual basis rolling forward, should all of the public entities desire to continue this good work, that you would annually approve two board members to sit on the committee itself. In addition, and attached to the agenda item is a written statement of purpose for the advisory committee. This is required under Governing Board Policy BDF, and so it identifies what the purpose of the Joint Advisory Committee would be, that it's subject to the open meeting law, that minutes will be prepared, that two members will be appointed, that the superintendent serves ex officio, and that the district will host meetings if asked and provide facilities and cooperation. And with that, I'm happy to entertain any questions you might have.
Before we move into board member questions or comments, I apologize, I misread the statement. I was not aware of the fact that we would be potentially appointing two tonight. I thought we were going to be doing that at the follow-up board meeting, the regular board meeting in 2 weeks' time. So we can do that if board members wish to put their names forward tonight, but that was not something that I was prepared to do, so I apologize for that, but we can have that selection tonight.
It's your
And,
purview. You can absolutely approve the committee and postpone the approval of 2 members if you'd like.
I'll defer to the rest of the board if they would like to appoint tonight, or if it would be easier just to wait 2 weeks. So we can have that discussion, but I will move to board member questions and comments and allow everyone to speak to that specific item then. Are there any board member questions or comments? Vice President Sinowski.
Yes, I'd like to make a comment. I think this is vital for our school district to participate jointly with our other education entities as well as our city, because we are, we serve our families, we serve our students, and we can't, doing it in silos just doesn't make sense. I feel like we can be much more effective working together and improving our community when we work together.
Thank you. Are there any, do you have any comments as to whether you think an election needs to be held tonight or whether it'd be easier to do it in 2 weeks' time?
I'm all for doing it tonight.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any other board member questions or comments? Board Member Hartwells?
I'll add that. Strongly supportive, and I personally think that anyone on the board would serve exemplary in the committee. And I also think we should just go ahead and take care of business tonight.
Okay. Any other board member questions or comments? Board Member Beckman, do you have any questions or comments?
I echo the statement that it is vital. I would like to see some sort of facet of every town or city where we have our schools reside, having a relationship with our governing board and our district in some fashion, not necessarily this formalized. I know Paradise Valley began a year and a half ago before COVID, so I'm thrilled to see this move forward.
Excellent. Do you have any views as to whether the election should be held or nomination selection should be held tonight or in 2 weeks' time?
Tonight is fine.
Okay. Well, tonight has it. Board Member Lindsay, do you have any questions or comments? None. Excellent. In that case, how should this be done? Because we have to approve it and then have the nominations taken?
Well, my suggestion would be that anybody who wants to serve on this, put forward their name. They can self-nominate themselves, and then the motion, I can help you craft the motion, but it would be to approve the Joint Advisory Committee pursuant to the governing board policy and nominate X and Y.
Okay, good. Do any board members wish to put their names forward for this committee?
Can I
Oh,
speak?
yeah, Vice President just staring at me. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
Vice President Sinowski.
I would love to self-nominate for that.
Okay, Julie. Thank you. Would any other members? Yep, Board Member Beckman.
Yes, Board Member Greenberg, as would I. I would as well.
Would any other board members wish to put their name forward for this committee? Excellent. In that case, without objection, I'll make a motion to approve those nominations as well as this committee. The chair moves to approve action item 7B, approval of Joint Advisory Committee on Education to serve jointly with members of the Council of the City of Scottsdale and members of the Governing Board of the Maricopa County Community College District, and to nominate Vice President Sinowski and Board Member Beckman to be the governing board members from SUSD on that committee.
And to approve the written statement of purpose.
And to approve the written statement of purpose. Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Board Member Lindsay seconds. It is moved and seconded that we approve the joint advisory action item 7B as presented in my motion. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. The motion carries 5-0.
Thank you.
The board will now move to action item 7C, substitute teacher retention stipend. Dr. Menzel.
Thank you, President Greenberg. I'd like to invite Dr. Bowman to provide a brief synopsis of the recommendation in front of you and to answer any questions.
A brief synopsis. Am I all that's standing between the ending of this meeting? So thank you for the reminder. Governing Board President Greenberg, Vice President Sinowski, other governing board members, and Dr. Menzel. It's my pleasure tonight to be in front of you to make a recommendation to honor our substitute teachers with a retention stipend. As we know, this year has been untenable at times with trying to navigate all of the different nuances that COVID-19 has presented us. We would not have been able to survive the days that we did without our substitute teachers stepping up. Tonight, it's my pleasure to make a recommendation that we honor 351 active substitutes with this retention stipend, many who were in the front line at the time when we were really questioning whether or not we should have children in school and adults in school. So what we have in front of you is the presentation that prorates our substitutes based on the number of days they've served. And so the maximum number of student days was 180. And so we are honoring all subs who've served in our school district, with the minimum amount would be $100 and the maximum amount would be $1,000, similar to what we did for our retention stipend for all staff. So what you'll see is that kind of a cut point for more than 100 on the minimum is 18 days subbed. So teachers who subbed any days more than 18 will receive more than 100, and any substitute teachers that sub 18 days or less will receive 100. So before you tonight is that proposal. I'm super excited about it, and I make the strong recommendation that you approve this recommendation tonight.
Board Member Hartwells.
Thank you for bringing this forward. As a former SUSD substitute teacher, I would say this is long overdue. So thank you for thinking about the substitute teachers. They certainly stepped up this year, and we needed it. So I am very glad to see it, and I'm very glad to support this evening.
Do any other board members have any questions or comments? Board Member Beckman, do you have any questions or comments?
The comment, I echo those statements. We are who we are because of the people that support our students, and our substitutes are greatly appreciated.
Any other board member? Vice President Sinowski.
I am thrilled with this. I think these types of gestures are the least we can do for our employees. So, yay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other board member questions or comments? I echo the sentiments shared before, and I kind of have to laugh. This looks like a music publishing or business deal with these minimum caps in here. So I had a little bit of a PTSD when I first read it. This is a great program. So thank you for putting this together.
You're welcome.
The chair moves to approve action item 7C, substitute teacher retention stipend as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Board Member Hartwell seconds. It is moved and seconded that the board approve action item 7C as presented. All those in favor say aye.
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 The motion carries 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
The board will now move to action item 7D, approval to the revisions to the Student Code of Conduct 2021-2022 school year. Dr. Menzel.
So now we'll start a line-by-line review. Just kidding. I will turn it over to Shannon Cron, who's done a lot of work in terms of reviewing and revising the Uniform Code of Conduct. Shannon.
All right. Good evening, Dr. Menzel, President Greenberg, Vice President Sinowski, governing board members, and Mrs. Wagner. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to be here tonight to share with you the recommendations of the Code of Conduct Committee. So I just want to start by acknowledging the Code of Conduct Committee and the work that they put into having conversations and making some recommendations that I'll share with you tonight. So we had representation from across the district, from elementary school, middle school, high school representatives. We also had athletic director, represented, legal counselor, counselors, and then what was great about this committee is they also worked very closely with teachers, staff on their campus, some of the coaches, and then also student. So we heard a lot from student voice as well. So the Code of Conduct Committee is a committee that gets together every year to ensure that the SUSD Code of Conduct is in compliance with federal, state, and local law. We really look at whether or not we are ensuring consistency and implementation of the code across SUSD, so from the different schools, elementary, middle, and high school. Our guiding principles are to create a learning climate at each school that's focused on prevention, that's positive, to develop clear, appropriate, and consistent expectations, and to ensure fairness, equity, and continuous improvement. I should also just note that some of the recommendations that may come forward next year or even the following year are conversations that we're having today. So perhaps there are different issues that come up on campuses, and I'm just going to give an example of dress code. That has been an issue that has been brought up recently. So we've started that conversation. We've started, talking to students about, that topic, what it looks like on their campus, really trying to gather a better understanding of some of those concerns. At this point, we're not at a place where we have concrete recommendations to bring forward, but that is something that we will continue next year. So I just want to share that again, as different issues or topics happen on our campuses, we do respond and start those conversations. So here is just a snapshot of what our behavioral data looks like. So our schools, and then as a district, we look at what we call the Big Five. And so our schools on a monthly basis will look at their Big Five data. And those are the most common infractions that have happened on their campus that month. And then we also look at it as year to year. And so here, and it's kind of crazy because as you guys know, the last couple years have not been typical school years. So really the last typical school year was 2018-19. And so you can see during that school year that the Big Five, defiance and disrespect was our number one, area of concern. That disruption, minor aggressive act, tobacco, and then language. So those were our Big Five. This graph might be a little bit confusing or hard to read too because, again, looking at that was an entire school year. So you could see there was 1,002 defiance, disrespect. It's going to look different, but I just wanted to, again, give you guys kind of a snapshot of what those Big Five behavioral infractions were across the different years. So last year, was a unique year as well. In March, we went into virtual learning. And then, of course, this year has been a year that we've never experienced before. So obviously, you're going to see, a significantly lower number of behavioral infractions, but you can also see some changes. Whereas, we're no longer seeing tobacco, we see more student ID violations. Again, it's important for our schools to dig deeper into this, which is why they look at this data on a monthly basis. And what they do is they drill down, so they're able to look at what are the problem behaviors on their campus, when are they occurring, and by who. And that helps us then be able to put additional supports or interventions in place. So the code of conduct could be considered reactionary because it guides our administrators' response to behavioral infractions or problematic behaviors on campus. However, of course, we recognize that the best way to keep our campus and our students safe is by focusing on school climate and social emotional learning. So I just wanted to share kind of an overview again of the different practices that are put in place, areas that we're trying to focus on in order to improve behavior and really kind of look at behavior from a preventative standpoint and a supportive standpoint. So we've enhanced training in PBIS, which is the Positive Behavior Intervention and Supports, really kind of focused this year on trauma-informed practices and social emotional learning. We've also implemented the Sanford Harmony, which is an SEL curriculum, a Castle Select program in grades kindergarten through 5th grade. We've created Nearpod SEL lessons and Wednesday learning opportunities for students in grades K through 12. And those are, again, available for our teachers, for our administrators to use kind of on an as-needed basis. So some schools have chosen to implement those on a weekly basis. Some schools do it during morning announcements a couple times a week. It really depends on the individual schools. We've decreased our student to counselor ratio from 375 students to every one counselor. We've trained assistant principals, counselors, and social workers on the Comprehensive School Threat Assessment Guidelines, which we call the CSTAG. We have JFCS specialist social workers, counselors that are providing student assistance programs, which is really those psychosocial groups. So small group supports based on some of the problematic behaviors or more mental health needs that we might be seeing on our campuses. Those groups have occurred this year, both virtually and in person. And then we've also piloted a one-on-one mentorship program through Experience Matters. And so that is being able to connect some of our students that are really kind of struggling, would benefit from a more supportive, adult to help with not only that school connectedness, but also some of those executive functioning skills. So we've used them to help with organization, identify learning strategies, help with some very brief tutoring, but really more of that school connectedness. And then we've expanded community supports through the Trauma-Informed Primary Prevention Grant. And that is where we've really tried to engage our community with the awareness, presentations, provide additional supports to our parents through some, parenting classes, parenting support groups. Again, sometimes we have to work on changing adult behavior before we can change student behavior. And so we want to make sure that we are providing supports across the board. So to our families, our staff, and then of course students as well. So the recommendations from the committee in regards to some of those changes to the code would be minor language edits to add clarity. We wanted to add a restorative practice statement in the beginning, and so that code has more of a positive feel. So when we look at it, we welcome students to SUSD. We're here to teach. We're here to teach academics. We're also here to teach and reinforce positive behavior. And so that's why we really felt that that was an important addition. We want to make minor adjustments to disciplinary consequences where, again, rather than going straight into something punitive, we start with more of a restorative practice for those level 1 infractions. We also, would like to recommend separating our level 1 and level 2. So level 1 are those minor infractions. A level 2 is an infraction that requires mandatory reporting to either ADE or law enforcement. So something like bringing a weapon to school, we might not start with a restorative practice, right? But something such as defiance or disrespect, we could start with reteaching a positive behavior. We will also would like to add consent for that SABRS or that SEL screening into the student release form. And so that is in the first couple pages of the Code of Conduct where parents sign off, allowing us permission to, for yearbook release or media release, participation in student assistance programs. We'd like to add that parent consent in that area as well. And then we've added language to define attendance expectations for SOL, so that language was not in the code in previous years. And then rearrange the table of contents. And so when our families or parents are looking at that code of conduct, what they're able to dive into is the behaviors, have a better understanding of what's expected on campus versus the kind of appendix of definitions for school staff. So we've shifted some of those things to the back, but then we've also added section jumps so information is easily accessible. So those are really the changes that the team has created this year that we would like to bring to the table, propose for approval. In regards to next steps, as you know, we received the School Safety Program grant, which we're really excited about, especially providing those additional supports to some of our schools that may not have had counselors or social workers in the past. To date, we have offered 9 social workers positions within the district, so we are making some progress. I'm excited about that. We are looking at that implementation of the SABRS, which is that SEL screener, to help us identify students, from that tier 1, maybe even identify students that we would recommend for some of those psychosocial SAP groups early on in the school year. Continue data analysis to help us expand some of those tiered behavioral interventions. The expansion of restorative practice and that CSTAG training. So obviously we're going to have a lot more social workers next year. They are some of our mental health professionals, so we will need to provide that CSTAG or that comprehensive threat assessment training for our social workers. And then of course the restorative practice as well. So, one of the things that our social workers will be able to do is, engage students in peer meditation or mediation, I'm sorry. And then meditation, which they might need to do that too, I don't know. So we're looking at expanding, that restorative practice. We're excited about it. An increase in trainings on trauma-informed practices, some of those de-escalation, strategies, and mindfulness. And then to continue to enhance community partnerships and mentoring opportunities. So the school that, participated in that Experience Matters mentorship program this year we did a pre and post. There was growth in regards to, students showing an improvement in their study skills and an improvement in feeling connected to school campus. So we would like to expand that program by recruiting more volunteers or mentors, and then review the Arizona Youth Survey data, which, it was supposed to be conducted last school year, the 2020, but then we went into COVID and virtual learning. So that window was reopened, so all of our schools were able to participate in the Arizona Youth Survey this fall. So we have received that data, and we'll be sharing that with several different stakeholder groups. I'm excited because this year they also added the ACEs, which was the Adverse Childhood Experiences, questions back into the Arizona Youth Survey. And that information can be really eye-opening, to our communities when they have a better understanding of some of the experiences that our children have experienced outside of the school environment, and really kind of helps drive, what additional supports that we may need. And so with that, I'm open to questions, thoughts, concerns. So thank you.
Board Member Hart-Wells.
First, thank you, Ms. Cron, for answering my questions. We had some back and forth electronically. And one of the questions I asked, but I think it's important, and you've answered, I think it's important to do so publicly, is on the release that would be added for the SEL, that what kind of information will be provided to the parents so they can understand what release they're contemplating signing?
Yeah, absolutely. And so we have student support services, monthly newsletters, which our social workers really help contribute to. And so the information regarding the SABRs, what that is, the information that's gathered, how we use that information will be shared in that student support newsletter. Okay. And then our social workers and our school administrators will be asked to share that newsletter with their community.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do any other board members have questions? Vice President Sanowski.
Thank you. I'm really glad the conversation about dress code is going to continue, because I know this isn't just a student issue, it's a staff issue as well. As far as making sure we're including middle school and high school students and staff in trying to really create a more meaningful, respectful, and enforceable student dress code, I think is really important. It was shared during our teen town halls. I know it's an issue on campuses as well. I also kind of been connecting some dots here between social workers. I know our goal is to hire one for each campus. And lowering the student to counselor ratio is great. I think that's one benefit. Another potential benefit is the use of our SROs, and then our teachers and all four of those groups working together to have conversations, given time during the workday, to have conversations to discuss particular student needs and put in place activities, incentives, programs, whatever works, to help our students better. I think, again, we need to get away from working in those silos and see this more as a comprehensive, student-focused approach. So I really appreciate the work that's being done and the conversations that have started. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do any other board members have questions or comments? Board Member Beckman?
Yeah, Shannon, thank you for this. Just one quick question that I should have asked before, but I didn't see it, and it just popped out now. Yeah. The attendance for SOL, can you describe that, please? Because by nature, SOL is self-paced. So what are we doing with regard to SOL and attendance?
Sure. So the language that is being proposed is to add a comment in there that, I guess, students would need to log in and complete work within 10 days before they were considered absent.
Okay, that makes sense. I was just making sure it wasn't something that was a little bit more rigid. I
No.
appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Board Member Hartwells.
Just a comment on that component after having spent a year trying to figure out what is the best way to hold students who are learning asynchronously or even kind of hybrid model online. And I would just also recommend that maybe that be part of your living conversation in the committee because you probably need to revisit that based on my experience.
Absolutely, thank you.
Are there any further board member questions or comments? Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
The chair moves to approve action item 7D, approval to the revisions to the Student Code of Conduct 2021-2022 school year as presented. Is there a second? Board Member Hartwell seconds. Well, she got you there. Are there any further comments or questions? It is moved and seconded that the board approve action item 7D as presented. All those in favor say aye.
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 The motion carries 5-0. The chair moves to adjourn this special meeting of the Scottsdale Unified Number 48 Governing Board on June 8th, 2021. The time is 8:10 p.m. Is there a second? Board Member Hartwell seconds. It is moved and seconded that the board adjourn the special meeting at 8:11 p.m. All those in favor say aye.
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 The motion carries 5-0 and the meeting is adjourned. Board Member Beckman, thank you for joining us telephonically. I know it is very early where you are.